Welcome to the Theology Made podcast. I'm Jordan. In today's episode, we're looking at the theology of the weekend. If you walked up to a Roman centurion in the year 50 AD and you asked him, "Hey bro, what are your plans for the weekend?" He would have stared at you in total confusion. Not just because he didn't speak English, but because the weekend didn't exist. For the ancient world, time was flat, a relentless circle. You worked until you died, or at least until a specific pagan festival determined by the emperor or the harvest, and you had a day to drink and watch the games. But there was one group of people in the Roman Empire who did something truly subversive. Every 7 days, regardless of the harvest, the tax collector, or the emperor's whims, they just stopped. This was the Sabbath, and it was the first time in human history that time was claimed by God instead of the state. The trial of the weekend, it begins with the Jewish Sabbath. In the ancient Near East, your value was your productivity. If you were a slave in Egypt, you were a brickmaker. Your identity was your output. And when God issues the commandment to rest in Exodus 20, he isn't just giving a suggestion for self-care, he's issuing a political manifesto. Man is not a machine. And because God rested on the seventh day, rest is a divine attribute. To rest is to imitate the Creator. By resting, the Hebrew people were essentially saying to Pharaoh, "You don't own my time, God does." And as Christianity spread, a theological glitch occurred. The Jewish Sabbath was Saturday, but the early Christians began meeting on the first day, Sunday, to celebrate the resurrection. And for 3 centuries, Christians lived in a double-time world. They worked all day Sunday because it was a normal workday in Rome and then met secretly at night or before dawn. And then the first verifiable fact of the state mandated weekend, it happens in March 321 AD. The Emperor Constantine issued an edict. On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed. Now, there's a nuance here. Constantine didn't call it the Lord's Day. In the legal text, he called it the day of the sun to keep the pagans happy. But this was the first time rest became a civil law. And the church argued that a society that doesn't rest is a society that is forgotten, it is mortal. Fast forward 1,500 years, and the church has successfully guarded Sunday as holy time for centuries, but then comes the Industrial Revolution. In the 1800s, the factory owners, many of whom were Sunday Christians, wanted 24/7 productivity. The natural rhythm of the sun was replaced by the artificial rhythm of the clock. Workers were so exhausted by Sunday morning that they weren't going to church to pray, they were going to the tavern to collapse. Workers in northern England began canonizing a fake saint called Saint Monday. They would simply not show up to work on Monday because they needed a day to recover from their Holy Sunday. The church, specifically the evangelicals and Methodists in the UK and US, became sort of the first labor union. They didn't lobby for a weekend because they wanted people to go to the beach. They lobbied for the Saturday half holiday because they wanted to protect the sanctity of Sunday. The strategy, if we give them Saturday afternoon to play and drink, they'll be sober and ready for God on Sunday morning. So the weekend was a compromise between the factory, which wanted 7 days, the worker, who wanted St. Monday, and the church, which wanted a Holy Sunday. In 1926, Ford became one of the first major employers to adopt a 5-day week. Why? Well, he realized workers needed time to buy things and drive their cars. In New York and Eastern Europe, Jewish workers are being fired for refusing to work on Saturday, the Sabbath. And so the modern 2-day weekend is sort of a theological reconciliation. It's the only time in the week where the Jewish Sabbath, Saturday, and the Christian Lord's Day, Sunday, sit side by side in the secular law. We often think of the weekend as our time, but theologically, the weekend is God's time that he gave back to us. What about today? In the ancient world, time was governed by the sun. In the industrial world, it was governed by the clock. In our world, it's governed by the notification. Theology has always been about boundaries between the sacred and the profane, the clean and the unclean, and the weekend was the ultimate boundary in time. But the smartphone has effectively repaganized our time. When you check a work email at 9 p.m. on a Saturday, you're essentially breaking the Sabbath in a theological sense. You're admitting that your Pharaoh, your boss, your bank account has more power over your time than your Creator. For 3,000 years, the Sabbath and the weekend were protected by physical walls. To go to work, you had to go to work. To go to church, you had to go to church. There was a geographical boundary between your productivity and your peace. But in our digital age, the factory is in our pockets. The Pharaoh no longer needs a whip. He just needs a push notification. And then we come to the historical reality of the 24/7 economy. In the ancient world, darkness was a theological limit. God made the night for rest. But with electricity and now the global digital cloud, we've created a world where it's always noon. And if there's no night, is there a Sabbath? When we check our Slack messages or emails on a Sunday morning, we're performing a liturgical act. We're saying, "The market is my shepherd, I shall always want." We have replaced the still small voice of God with the infinite scroll of the algorithm. Across the world today, we see this interesting trend, the rise of the digital Sabbath. Secular tech executives in Silicon Valley, the very people who built the attention economy, are now paying thousands of dollars to go on analog retreats, where their phones are locked in lead-lined boxes. And these secular detoxes, they're functionally very similar to the 4th century desert fathers who fled the noise of the Roman cities to find God in the silence of the Egyptian sands. But here's the difference. The desert fathers fled to find someone, God. The modern digital Sabbatarian is fleeing to find themselves. True liberty, as the theologians of the Sabbath argue, is the right to unplug. It is the right to tell the world, "I do not belong to you today." Hey, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on.